Hey everyone, I'm Tim Foote, CEO of Slingshot Group, where we partner with churches and organizations to find and coach great leaders and build remarkable teams in healthy culture. And today I've got Beth Graybill with me from our non-profit staffing and coaching division at Slingshot Group. And we're talking about something that we see so many leaders ignore, and that's culture. Beth has been a discipleship pastor, sat on nonprofit boards. She's a consultant and storyteller, and big on helping churches and ministries build a better culture. So Beth, why is this a focus area for you?
I realized early on in my career that what really got me out of bed every morning was empowering people in their progress. And that looks like caring about the health of an individual in an organization, but also about the organization as a whole. And so I've also been a part of some really great organizations with a really strong culture and some organizations where their culture was just really struggling. And so this is a really passion area of mine.
So based on that, what's the difference, or what clarifies great culture and not great culture?
Yeah, I think based on my experience, I would say three things. The first is clarity. How clear are we being? The second would be communication. And the third is care. And I do think that all of those go together. You know, first there's clarity, then communication, then care.
Yeah, that's interesting because clarity and communication have come up big in other episodes in this series. Unpack care a little bit for us.
Yeah, to me that looks like, how are you appreciating your employees? What kinds of opportunities are you giving them to develop as humans outside of their role and responsibility for the organization? What kind of benefits are you providing? And I don't just mean monetary benefits, but I mean, how are you being creative about the way you're caring for the people in your organization and the people that they're caring for? So sometimes that just tangibly, that looks like, what's your vacation policy, your time off? How are you? Is there opportunity if someone has medical leave and they're out of their time, can other people contribute to that medical leave? Just those kinds of things that I think are the intangibles of care, but I think care is really important.
So over the next few minutes, we're going to talk about some top things that contribute to healthy culture. What would be the number one?
Clarity. Yep. And I think clarity bleeds into like onboarding and hiring. It bleeds into culture. It bleeds into, are people clear on what it looks like to succeed, to fail, those sorts of things.
Talk about how clarity speaks into identity of an organization and why that's important.
Yeah, I think clarity speaks into the identity of an organization in a way that is like, are we clear on our branding? And does that brand bleed into everything else that we do? Do people feel appreciated, valued? Do they know what they're there to do? Do they also know what they're there to not do, right? What does it look like to be celebrated? What does it look like to fail in an organization? Are people celebrating failures? Like, can people fail fast and keep moving forward? Those sorts of things. How can they take risks? I think taking risks is a big part of clarity in an organization as well.
As well as being on our Slingshot team, Beth, you bring clarity to a lot of organizations through storytelling.
I do.
So how is storytelling and an organization's story and the collective story of the leaders that are part of that organization inform clarity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that an organization's story is the compass, right? We all need the place that feels like home to us as individuals and to an organization. And so at the end of the day, like, what's the foundation of this organization? What are we about? How do we show up? How do we belong and how do we behave? I think are really important things.
What's some advice that you would give leaders who need to call some sensitive things out? Because good culture, or to find out where you need to work on good culture, it's often around those things that are not spoken about or not talked about.
Right.
So what would be your advice to those leaders in other parts of the organization to bring that to light?
I think that it's really important for leaders to lead by example.
Yeah.
If they've messed up, made a mistake, that they need to call that out. And in doing so, I think other people will feel, it will communicate, it is safe to mess up here. It is safe to acknowledge that you've messed up here. You will not lose your job. Maybe there's a development track that you'll need to be placed on, or some kind of performance management that needs to be happened. But this is a safe place for us to be human, I think, is first and foremost with a leader who acknowledges their own mistakes. And then a second, I think, is a feedback loop. Is feedback collected? Is it hallway conversations? Are there actual like innovative systems and processes? Are 360s a regular part of the culture, or honest, open conversation? Conflict, how do we handle conflict, right? That tells us so much about an organization.
So you've dug into clarity and you've done a lot of work around clarifying who you are as an organization, who you want to be. What are some other ways to build healthy culture?
I think a few more important things about building a healthy culture are, what does your onboarding process look like? This is the first 90 days. The first day is so important. One time I was a part of an organization, and the very first day, it was like, I went and got my computer, and then I went and checked in and got all my security things. And then I went to my cubicle area because my team was in a cubicle at that point. And it was kind of like, okay, have a great day. Are you good with the things you're working on? We're headed to lunch. That was not a great first day experience.
I remember one time I got to an office and my computer wasn't even ready.
Okay.
And I had an old one and it wasn't quite working, that kind of thing.
Right.
Not a good look.
Right. And so much of the first day isn't about what you do, right? It's about who you are, and it's about collaborating with the team or getting connected with the team. I think it's all about connection. And again, going back to clarifying, those first few days are great opportunities to talk about the origin story of the organization, to talk about how we talk about our organization, our branding, our culture, our values, or our mantras, those sorts of things.
Beth, I remember when I was doing ministry in Australia years ago, we didn't have paid staff. I had to build a volunteer ministry culture, and it was all about telling a beautiful story about what it was to serve in this ministry. Create a get-to culture. Here's an opportunity I want you to consider being a part of. And some of those volunteers would see their volunteer role as important as their paid job, and they became dear friends that I'm still friends with today.
Absolutely. I think the tricky part in that is also asking a spouse or a family member what that's like, because sometimes people love their volunteer role so well that you're right, they treat it like their second job. And so I think part of our responsibility as a healthy organization is to make people feel like they belong, tell a great story, allow people to show up and be shoulder to shoulder with us, because we all get to do this, but also make sure that there's care being provided, that they are asking themselves questions like, are they also paying attention to the other people and the other things that they have going on in their
That's
lives?
an interesting point, because good culture is about stewarding your people resource as well.
Yes.
And caring about the holistic person that's serving in your ministry or on your staff team. So how do you balance growth and risk with stewarding your people well when it comes to healthy culture?
I would say for the organization that thinks like, oh, our culture's fine, we don't need to pay attention, I would ask, like, how big is your budget? Because I think if you're not paying attention to developing your people, to providing risks and opportunities, I think that they'll get to a place where they eventually move on.
Yeah. It's interesting, Beth, in our work at Slingshot, when we go in and assess organizations or churches, that's why the questions we ask about culture are so crucial.
Right.
Because we want to place leaders in healthy culture so they can thrive. We also want to place leaders in healthy cultures to perpetuate healthy culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our culture changes every time we add a new team member. So I think that's something that we need to be really mindful of, is how is this particular individual changing the culture of our organization with what they bring to the table.
So that's something we say all the time at Slingshot. When we add a new team member, we always say our culture changed today, which brings me to my next question I'd be interested to hear you talk about, and that is, when do you know when to go outside to bring somebody in who's invariably going to change culture a little bit, to developing a leader to be promoted from within?
I think good culture promotes from within, first and foremost. I think there are situations where maybe there's cultural misalignment happening, or you need to get someone realigned, or a team realigned, or the organization as a whole. And then I think it's important to bring someone in from the outside if they fit where you think that you need to adjust the alignment. I would say competency is another area where people tend to hire outside. If no one on your team has the skills that you need for a specific role, then who do you know? Who can you tap shoulders with? with it first within your organization, and then with the people that are familiar with your organization, are adjacent to the work that you're doing. Because in essence, then you're still starting within.
So to sum up, Beth, the 3 fertilizers, if you like, for healthy culture are clarity, communication, and care. What's one exercise that a team or an individual leader listening or watching today could do this week, this month, to assess how they're doing in those 3 areas?
Well, I think start with asking questions. Some people use sort of a SWOT analysis or a 4 helpful list, but I think asking something around like what's working well, what's not working well is really important. Those are the important questions. And then I think for leaders, it's really important for us to be asking our people, what's it like to be on the other side of me?
So as you build a better culture in your church or organization, clarify your story and your values. Communicate how your people are part of that story, and care and support your leaders. This is all part of building a healthy culture. And in all things, stay curious and reach for the remarkable.